The 38 Letters from J.D. Rockefeller to His Son. Perspectives, Ideology, and Wisdom. Written by J.D. Rockefeller. Narrated by Rick Font. Letter 12. Good people may end up in hell, and arrogance can lead to downfall. Making money and being goal-oriented are important, and success comes to those who seek out or create opportunities. August 11th, 1918. Dear John, today, on my way to play golf, I encountered a challenge that I have not met in a long time. A young man arrogant overtook my car in his fashionable Chevrolet. He provoked this old man's competitive nature, and in the end, he could only look at the back of my car. This made me very happy, just like when I defeated my opponent in the business. John, eagerness is my nature that never wears off, so I say that those who condemn my endless greed are wrong. In fact, I do not like money. What I like is making money. What I like is the good feeling of victory. Of course, the feeling when others lose sometimes touches my compassion, but doing business is a harsh competition. There is nothing more ruthless than the determination to force others out, but you can only avoid the tragic fate of defeat by finding ways to defeat your opponent. This is the case when there is competition. It is undeniable that if you want to succeed, you often must sacrifice others. However, if you pursue victory and hope to win, you must resist the idea of sympathizing with others. You cannot just want to be a good person. You can't retain your strength. You can't evade or delay letting your opponent out. You know, hell is full of good people, and the pain of failure is part of the business war. We are all strangling our opponents. Without the determination to compete and fight to the end, we only have the qualifications to be losers. Frankly speaking, I do not like competition, but I try to compete. Whenever I encounter a strong opponent, the competitiveness in my heart will burn, and when it extinguishes, what I gain is victory and happiness. Mr. Potts once brought me this kind of pleasure, and he was great. The war with Mr. Potts was due to a mistake of mine, a mistake made out of kindness. In the 1870s, oil was concentrated in a small area in northwestern Pennsylvania. If an oil pipeline network has built there to connect all the oil wells, I only needed one valve to control the entire oil region, thus completely dominating the industry. But I am worried that using pipelines for long-distance transportation will cause anxiety and fear to the railway companies that I work with. Therefore, in order to protect their interests, I did not launch any plans to lay oil pipelines, especially because they have helped me before. However, the Pennsylvania Railroad Company, which had tricked yet still made compromises with me, was ambitious. They tried to replace me and put the oil refining industry under their control. They merged the two largest oil pipelines in the oil area into their own railway network to get our necks stuck. And the person responsible for accomplishing this mission is Mr. Potts, president of Empire Transportation Company, a subsidiary of Pennsylvania Railroad Company. Sitting and watching the opponent, even if the strength of the potential opponent increases, it will weaken one's own strength and even subvert one's position. I am not that stupid. My belief is to reach the goal before others. I quickly set up the U.S. Transportation Company with the shrewd and capable Mr. O'Day and launched a self-defense counterattack with the Empire Transportation Company. Thank God our efforts paid off. Within a year, we controlled 40% of the oil transportation business in the oil region and suppressed Mr. Potts' attack. But this is just the beginning of my contest with Mr. Potts. The people who can get ahead in this world are those who know how to find their ideal environment. If they cannot do it, they will create it themselves. 2 years later, a new oil field was discovered in Bradford, Pennsylvania. Mr. O'Day quickly led his people to the place that aroused the dream of billions of people to make a fortune and pave the oil pipeline to the new oil well day and night. But all the guys in the oil field were crazy and unrestrained. They could not wait to collect all the oil overnight, and then left with joy on their faces. Therefore, no matter how hard Mr. O'Day and others work, they cannot meet the needs of transportation and storage of oil. I did not want to see the hard-working oil producers dig their own graves and destroy themselves. I asked Mr. O'Day to warn oil producers that their extraction capacity had far exceeded our transportation capacity. They must reduce production. Otherwise, the black gold that comes out will become worthless black soil. But no one accepted our kindness and advice, and no one appreciated our efforts, and instead denounced us, saying that we did not want to procure their oil. Just as when the oil producers in Bradford were at the peak of their emotions, Mr. Potts started taking action. He first led a series of demonstrations at our oil refineries in New York, Philadelphia, and Pittsburgh to acquire our competitors' refineries. Then he began to seize the site in Bradford and laid oil pipelines to transport Bradford's crude oil to his own refinery. I admire Mr. Potts's courage, and I was more than willing to accept the challenge he sought to shake my dominance in the oil refining industry. But I must drive him out of the oil refining industry. I first met up with the owner of the Pennsylvania Railroad Company, Mr. Scott. I told him bluntly that Mr. Potts was a poacher and he was breaking into our territory. We must stop him. But Mr. Scott was very stubborn and determined to allow Potts' thieving to continue. I had no choice but to challenge this powerful enemy. First, we terminated all business dealings with Pennsylvania Railroad Company. I instructed our subordinates to transfer the transportation business to the two major railway companies. Draft have always firmly supported us. Asked them to reduce freight rates, compete with Pennsylvania Railroad Company, weaken its power, and at the same time order all refineries in Pittsburgh that depend on the Empire Company for transportation to close. Subsequently, they instructed all its own refineries that were in competition with the Empire Company to sell refined oil at prices far lower than them. Pennsylvania Railroad Company is the largest transportation company in the United States. Mr. Scott held large power when it comes to transportation. They were proud that they have never been conquered. But under my three-dimensional oppressive style of play, they could only surrender. To fight against me, they reluctantly gave our competitors huge discounts. In other words, they paid others even when serving them. Then they resorted to an unpopular move, cutting employee and cutting wages. Scott and Potts did not expect that this would soon lead to punishment. In order to vent their dissatisfaction, the angry workers burned hundreds of tankers and locomotives in a fire, forcing them to ask the Wall Street Bank for an emergency loan. As a result, not only did the shareholders of Pennsylvania Railroad Company not get any dividends, but the stock price plummeted. As a result of their duel with me, their pockets were getting cleaner. Mr. Potts is indeed a soldier. In the smoke of life and death, he has spelt out the rank of colonel. He has an admirable and unyielding willpower. Therefore, even after the victory emerged, he still wanted to continue fighting with me. But Mr. Scott, who also has a military career and was the most authoritative ruling and powerful figure, knows more about the current affairs. He decisively lowered his arrogance and sent someone to tell me that he hoped to make peace and stop the oil refining business. I know that Colonel Potts wanted to prove himself to the great Moses, but he failed. He failed completely. A few years later, Potts gave up his desire to confront me and became an active and diligent director of one of my companies, this shrewd and slipper oil dealer. Arrogance usually leads to downfall. Scott and Potts and his ilk thought they were of noble origin and were always arrogant. Therefore, my heart was fluttering when I successfully tamed these arrogant donkeys. John, I like victory, but I do not like unscrupulous pursuit of victory. A victory at any cost is not a victory. The ugly means of competition is disgusting. It is tantamount to painting the ground as a prison. You may never be able to surpass it. Even if you win a victory, you may lose the chance to win again. And compliance does not mean that we must lower our determination to pursue victory, but it means using an ethical way to win a clear victory. And it also means that under such restrictions, we must strive to pursue victory fairly and ruthlessly. I hope you can do this. Love, your father.